to Music Tech Explained, the Visual Approach. My name is Edgar Rothermich, author of the best-selling book series Graphically Enhanced Manuals. In this video, I will show the exciting new features of the Logic Pro 10 update 10.4.2. Despite the point release, there are many new features and changes, small ones and pretty big ones. Lots of new stuff to learn and to incorporate into your Logic workflow. So let's dive into it. I also released a new book, Logic Pro 10 What's New in 10.4.2, available on my website logicprochem.com. On 85 pages, I provide more detailed information about the various features and changes that I didn't have time for in this video. And there are even a couple more features and changes that you don't want to miss, with information that you won't find anywhere else. First, let's start with a few improvements in various plugins in Logic Pro 10 10.4.2. First up, the Alchemy plugin. Now you can enter parameter values numerically. Alchemy has a new way that lets you enter parameter values in the advanced view. If you open the plugin window for Alchemy, you see the three buttons in the upper left corner that let you switch between the three views: Browse View, Simple View, and Advanced View. In Advanced View, you have all the parameters available to adjust the current instrument. All the parameters that are available as rotary knobs display the label below the knob. If you move the mouse over a knob or actively drag on the knob, then that label changes to display the current parameter value. So far so good, but what's new in this version is that you can now double-click on that label. A white entry field opens with the current value selected. Just type in the value you need and press enter or click outside the field and you are done. This is not only an alternate way to adjust a parameter value, it is also fast and more precise in case you already know the value you want to enter. For example, if you want to change the volume to exactly -9.3 dB, just double-click on that label, type -9.3 and press enter. Done. By the way, in case you didn't know, you can also hold down the Shift key while dragging on a knob to change the values with a finer resolution. The next improvement is a tiny little LED that is added to the filter buttons to indicate if a filter is selected. Again, we are in the advanced view and select any of the sources on the left side, A, B, C or D. You can see the filter section next to it with three filter buttons, 1, 2, 3. That means each source can have up to 3 filters. By selecting one of the buttons, the button turns blue, you make the parameters for that filter available right next to it, so you can configure those parameters. Now if you squint your eyes and look closely at those 3 filter buttons, you will see a tiny little LED on top of each button. It indicates whether that filter is enabled or not, so you don't have to actually click on the button to make its parameter visible, including the on-off button. For example, if you enable filter 1 and 3, but not filter 2, I can see right away that status of those 3 filters, especially if I switch between the different sources, and so I can quickly double-check on the various settings. Now let me demonstrate the third Alchemy improvement: drag and drop hot zones for importing audio files. It is another interface improvement that can speed up your workflow when importing audio files in Alchemy. So far, the import procedure required the following steps. First, you switch to Advanced View. You select a source, A, B, C or D, where you want to import the audio file to. Click on the Source Select field and choose the Import Audio option from the menu. The view changes now to an import dialog. First, you select an analysis mode in the lower left corner by clicking one of the buttons: Additive, Spectral, Additive plus Spectral, Granular or Sampler. Now you can select an audio file either from the Browser section, or you can drag an audio file from the Finder, or even directly from the Loop browser or All Files browser onto the drop zone. Now here is a new and more speedier method. There are two variations. Scenario 1. I have global or morph selected in the sidebar and want to add a sample from my bookmark folder in the All Files browser. Now dragging a file over Alchemy will change each of the 4 sources to a field of 4 hot zones. Dragging over a specific zone highlights that zone and determines the analysis mode for the audio file import when you release the mouse button. You will see the drop zones additive, spectral, granular, and sampler pop up. Move the file over one of those drop zones and release the mouse buttons. You can also drag it over a source that was disabled and it will automatically enable it. Now scenario 2, where I have one of the 4 sources selected in the sidebar, A, B, C, or D. When I drag the sample over Alchemy, the entire source field switches to the 4 hot zones. When I drag an audio file over, providing the 4 analysis modes for importing that audio file into the source. Again, release the mouse button over a drop zone to import that file with that analysis mode. The next plugin that has 2 additions is the Chroma Verb plugin that was introduced in Logic Pro 10 10.4. First, a new command, Reset Output EQ. Click on the Details tab to switch to the Details view. Now right-click on the label Output EQ on top of the plugin window, and a new shortcut menu opens with a single command, Reset Output EQ. This command will reset or flatten the curve of the current EQ curve. So if you get carried away with drawing your EQ curve, just select that command to reset it and start over. The second new command is Reset Damping EQ. Click on the Main View button to switch to the main view of Chroma Verb. It also has a curve, but here it is the damping EQ. Make sure you don't confuse this curve with a standard equalizer. Instead of having one fixed reverb value determined by the decay parameter, you can specify up to 4 frequency bands and have less or more reverb, less or more of the decay parameter in that frequency range. Pay close attention to the label on the y-axis on the left and right. The 100% mark represents the decay value set with the decay knob that determines the length of the reverb. Watch the value on the right y-axis change when you change the decay knob. For example, by lowering the curve in the higher frequency or lower frequency, you tell the Chroma Verb to apply a different decay value for the frequency range of the incoming signal. I demonstrate that in more details in my previous book, Logic Pro 10, What's New in 10.4. Okay, now back to the new feature. You can right-click on the label Damping EQ in the upper left corner and a new shortcut opens with a single command, Reset Damping EQ. This command will reset or flatten the curve of the damping EQ. By the way, you can shape the curve with 4 nodes, and you can just reset a single node by holding down the Option key when clicking on a node. The Logic developers added a little eye candy to the Step Effects and Fat Effects plugins. Both are listed in the Multi-Effects category of the plugin menu. The blue puck, that little dot in the blue square window, that you can move to simultaneously change the 2 parameters assigned to the X and Y, now has an animated effect around it that responds to the processed signal. Here's the Fat Effects with a bit ringer preset. And here's the Step Effects with a syncopated pulse preset. Before getting to the bigger features in this Logic update, let's have a quick look at some nice little addition in the Notepad window. Now you can add photos to the Notepad window in Logic. On Logic's main window, you have the Notepads button in the upper right corner that lets you toggle the Notepads window on the right window pane. The Notepad window has two tabs, Project and Tracks. For Project, you enter notes about this project. For example, production notes, collaboration, location, lyrics, anything related to that project. The Track notepad lets you enter information for each individual track. That means this window displays the content of the currently selected track. To enter any text, you have to click on the Edit button to switch to the edit mode. When done entering text, click the Done button. Any text entered for a track can also be displayed on the channel strip when the channel strip component Track Note is enabled. Now Logic Pro 10 10.4.2 extends the usability of the Notepad by allowing to add images. Just click on the Edit button to enter edit mode and drag any image from the Finder directly onto the Notepad window. But there is more. Once you edit the picture, you can move your mouse over the image and a downward arrow appears in the upper right corner. This is similar to other Mac OS apps, like when adding images to your email. Select Markup and you can edit the image directly inside Logic, and everything is saved with your project. For tracks, this image capability comes in very handy. For example, instead of describing what microphones you used on the snare and how you positioned them, you can take a picture and add that to the Track notepad. You can even add images with alpha channels. You can add images of your session players, the guitar player, the piano player, the drummer, and the trombone player. And in case you wondered, yes, you can even import animated GIFs. Remember, GIFs, not GIFs. By the way, delete an image by clicking on its right so the text insertion cursor appears and press the delete key. Now let's look at the mixer window that got some big new features in Logic Pro 10 10.4.2. But before getting into that, let me show you some few minor click improvements on a channel strip. Make sure you have the VCA slot visible by right-clicking on the channel strip background and selecting it from the channel strip components. In 10.4.1, you had to right-click or long-click on the VCA slot to open its pop-up menu. Now in 10.4.2, you just click on the VCA slot and the pop-up menu opens as expected. That means all the slots and buttons on the channel strip now behave as expected. You click on it and a pop-up menu, if available, opens up. Two little tips while we are in the mixer. First, whenever you open a menu, it will automatically close when you click on one of the menu items. However, if you open a menu just to check something or don't want to make a selection, you have to move the mouse to the side and click somewhere in the background. Not only is that too much activity, it also has the danger that you inadvertently click on something that causes an action, and you didn't realize that. To avoid all that, just press the Escape key on your keyboard, which will close the currently open menu. By the way, this also works for main menus too, not only pop-up menus. Here's a second tip. The EQ display and the gain reduction meter on top of the channel strip also function as buttons. If they are empty, then clicking on them will load the channel EQ plugin or the compressor plugin. And when these plugins are loaded, then you can click on those displays to open and close their plugin window. You can even drag or option drag the EQ display to move or copy that plugin to a different channel strip. You will find these important little details in my books Logic Pro 10 How It Works and the follow-up book Logic Pro 10 The Details. And here's a little bonus tip. When you shift-click on the EQ display, Logic will load the linear phase EQ plugin instead of the channel EQ plugin. Now let's look at one of the big new features in Logic Pro 10 10.4.2. This is how the new item was officially described. New mixer mode allows channel strip fader and pan controls to be used to set send level and pan. That means Logic has a new mixer mode, but there is much more important second feature buried in this sentence that can be easily overlooked. To set send level and pan. This is huge because Logic didn't have a pan control on the sends, but now in 10.4.2 it has this feature. Unfortunately, the implementation is a little bit strange and in my opinion too complicated. Instead of a button that switches to that new mixer view and places a new pan control on the send slot of the channel strip, there are multiple buttons, menu items, routing considerations, and lots of conditions that determine how that new feature works. Needless to say, it is not really intuitive and comes with a little bit of a learning curve. I spent 10 pages in my book Logic Pro 10 What's New in 10.4.2 to explain that feature with all the little details that you cannot find out by just clicking around. Let's start with the first part of this feature, the Sense on Faders view. Let me demonstrate the basic concept and implementation. Step 1. There is a new component on top of the mixer window, but it is only displayed if the mixer is wide enough. For example, you might not even see it on a 13-inch MacBook, so make sure you resize the mixer window accordingly. Step 2. Once you see the component, it shows its label Sense on Faders, an on-off button, and a selector that opens a pop-up menu. However, you can click on the button and the selector, but nothing will happen. Step 3. Now I add two sends using bus 5 and bus 8 on various channel strips. Bus 5 is coming back on aux channel strip 1 and bus 8 is coming back on aux channel strip 2. These two channel strips are the so-called returns. This is the basic routing concept with buses and aux returns, and here's a nice little signal flow diagram that I use in my book. Once I have buses and returns in my mixer setup, then I will see entries in the Sense on Faders menu. In my example, I see the two returns, aux1 and aux2, and the buses that are used as their input, the ones that are returned to those aux channel strips, bus 5 to aux1 and bus 8 to aux2. Step 5. And here's the functionality. When I select an item from the pop-up menu, the mixer view will change the following way. If I select a specific return from the pop-up menu, then all the channel strips that have a send routed to the bus used on that return will change to show that send button in yellow. The volume faders on all those channel strips with that send will change to yellow to indicate that they now function as the send level. As you can see, when you change the fader, the send level knob next to the send button changes accordingly. Both controls are linked. Two other things happened that you should be aware of. All the volume faders of channel strips that are not routed to that bus will have no volume fader at all. And also all the pan controls disappear from the channel strips. However, that depends on the second feature that I show in a moment. You can select a different return from the Sense on Faders menu to change the mixer view showing the channel strips that are using that bus routing. The on-off button just toggles the mixer view using the last selected return. Besides assigning a key command for toggling the Sense on Faders view, you can also switch it from two other menus. On the individual channel strip, you can click on a specific Sense button and select the menu item at the bottom to switch to that view. Select it again to disable it. The other option is to right-click on the aux channel strip background and select the command Sense on Faders from the shortcut menu that pops up. This will switch the Sense on Faders view to that aux return. So what is this feature good for? For example, headphone mixes. The tiny little send level knobs are not really comfortable to set levels. By switching to the Sense on Fader view for the returns you are using for the headphone mix, you not only have the long faders available, but also have a better overview about the level settings. Please note that the level meters next to the faders don't switch. They still display the channel level and not the send level. But what about the second feature? Where are the pan controls on the Sense? That's where it gets tricky. Here are the rules. Logic didn't add pan controls on all the Sense slots of a channel strip, and there is no global switch to enable the pan controls. You have the option to add a pan control on each Sense slot individually. You add or remove a pan control to a Send by clicking on that Send button and click the menu item Independent Pan. The menu item will show a check mark if that Sense slot has a pan control activated. However, and here is the big condition, the pan control will not be added as an additional component on the channel strip. Instead, Logic can only display the pan control if the Sense on Faders view that we just discussed is enabled. And even then, it only shows the pan controls for the bus that uses the currently selected return on the Sense on Faders menu. This is where the not so intuitive part comes in. There are two indications when a Sense slot has an individual pan control. First, the ring on the pan control is yellow, and the ring on the Send level knob also becomes yellow. You can change the mode of the pan control the same way like on the channel pan controls, by right-clicking on them and selecting the pan mode. There are a lot of features and functionalities that apply to the new Sense on Faders view and the independent pan. I show them in my book Logic Pro 10, What's New in 10.4.2, plus examples on how to use these new features with stems, dual stereo surround mixes and more. Here's a signal flow diagram from the book where I try to show the functionality and an overview of the various color codes you have to pay attention to. Relocate the sound library. This new feature is listed first on the official announcement What's New in Logic Pro 10 10.4.2. The sound library can be relocated to an external storage device. This solves the following problem. Logic Pro 10 comes with a sound library that has grown with each update. Now it is about 70 gigabytes of loops, samples, instruments, and all types of files. However, the problem was that all these sounds have to be stored on the boot drive of your computer, and that could become an issue if you are running, for example, out of disk space. In the past, it was fairly simple to move those library files to a different drive and create an alias at the original location. However, Logic Pro 10 changed the way how it accesses those files, and aliases didn't work anymore. Instead, you had to use some Unix trickery called symlinks or symbolic links, which was a little bit too geeky for most Logic users. Now the 10.4.2 update provides a super easy interface to move, or let's say relocate, the sound library to a different location other than the boot drive. First, you open the new Relocate Sound Library dialog by going to the Logic Pro 10 menu, scroll down to the Sound Library submenu, which has a new menu item, Relocate Sound Library ... It opens that new dialog. Once the Relocate Sound Library dialog is open, you will see all the drives that are mounted on your computer. Only the drives on that list that have an empty status field are available as a new destination. Select the drive that you want to move the sound library to and click the Relocate button at the bottom. Logic now copies the sound library over, which might take a while. You see a progress bar and information about that progress, and after it is done, you will get a confirmation window. That is as easy as it gets, at least in a perfect world. There are a lot of little details, however, that you have to know in case something goes wrong and you are confronted with some error message. I go into all those details and explanations of those error messages and dialogues in my book, and I highly recommend reading through that before you use that Relocate feature. Here's a quick summary of things you have to be aware of about the Relocate feature. You can move the sound library to any mounted drive, not only external drives, so any internal drive, for example. Network drives and time machine drives won't work. The sound library can only be relocated as a whole. You cannot pick specific folders like the EXS instruments. Also, you cannot specify a specific folder on the new drive. The sound library will always be placed on the root directory of the new file. Apple loops will not be moved. The move also affects the GarageBand sound library, and when you use GarageBand or older Logic versions, you have to be careful and understand the interaction that I explain in my book. When you download and install new files from Apple's sound library, they will be moved directly to the new destination, with some fine prints to be aware of. Be careful if you launch Logic and the drive is not mounted. You will get an alert dialog, but clicking the wrong button could mess up the link to your relocated sound library. Now let's go over some small but still important improvements throughout Logic. The first one is a help tag for nudging. Be aware of that little checkbox Show Help Tags in the Display Preferences General. When enabled, a help tag in the form of a little black window, also called a popover with an anchor pointing at the object, will appear when moving regions, MIDI events, or automation control points. They appear in the workspace or the editors. It provides information about that specific action, like moving, copying, trimming, etc. Now the help tag will also be displayed when nudging a region in the workspace. It works when clicking on the nudge button on the toolbar or when using the key command Option arrow left or Option arrow right, or any of the many key commands. Next, help tags with marquee selection. The help tag is now also displayed when dragging a marquee selection, so you can see the precise value of the start, end, and length of the marquee selection that you drag. Here is one of those small additions that have a huge workflow impact. Shift double-click to start playback. Logic Pro 10 version 10.4 added the ability to shift-click anywhere on the workspace to place the playhead at that click position. That means you didn't have to travel to the top of the workspace to click on the ruler. But somehow they forgot one additional click action. Not only do I want to place the playhead at the click position, I also want to start the playback at that click position. And now that is possible. Hold down the Shift key and double-click anywhere on the workspace to place the playhead at that position and start the playback. Please check out my YouTube video about the trackpad, where I show some tricks how you can assign gestures to that action, so you don't even have to hold down the Shift key anymore. Next one, join looped MIDI regions. This one is a real nice addition when you use looped MIDI regions. In 10.4.1, if you have a looped MIDI region, you couldn't convert the entire length with all the loop iteration to a single MIDI region. Now in 10.4.2 you can. Just use the regular join regions command, like Command J, or any of the other edit menus. The next one, import selected file as stems. There is a new important checkbox in the dialog that appears when dragging multiple files at once from the Finder or even the All Files browser onto the workspace in your project. Let me demonstrate that by using the first files in the bookmarks folder that I used earlier for the Alchemy plugin. I select all the files that I want to import. When I drag them onto the workspace, the dialog opens as expected that lets you determine how you want the files to be placed on the workspace. For example, create new tracks or use existing tracks. The checkbox at the bottom is new. All selected files are stems from one project. If you select that checkbox and import the files, then nothing looks special. However, if you open the project audio browser, you click on the project tab in the upper right corner, you will see that Logic has created what looks like an audio file group. This is a new thing in version 10.4.2 and it is called a Smart Tempo Multitrack set, a very powerful feature when working with multitrack recordings or stems, and use the Smart Tempo feature. I will explain that when showing the new Smart Tempo features later in the video. The next two improvements are about automation. The first one, lasso around automation points. Before 10.4.2, when you lassoed around automation control points to draw a selection, Logic drew a selection box that was getting bigger or smaller depending on your drag movement. Now when you drag left or right on the automation lane, you only see the left and right border of the entire selection, moving with your mouse. This is similar to a marquee selection. However, remember the other dragging feature that was introduced recently. You can hold the Option key while dragging, and that will now create a box because now only the control points inside that box are selected. This feature is useful if you only want to adjust the higher or lower values of an automation curve or a range in between. The second automation improvement is magnetic behavior when moving automation control points. Before 10.4.2, when you move an automation control point over an existing control point, then that existing control point will be deleted. Now in 10.4.2, there is a very subtle change. When you move an automation control point close to an existing control point, it will snap to the existing control point, so you are able to place them on top of each other. This might be useful if you want to create some sudden value changes. As I said, this is very subtle, so don't move too fast towards the existing control point or you will overshoot and delete the existing control point. By the way, as long as you hold down the mouse button, you can move back and the existing control point reappears. Here is one small addition in the articulation editor. Open the articulation editor by clicking on the articulation set parameter in the track inspector and select Edit. Now select the Output tab in the dialog and you will see a new checkbox at the bottom labeled Activate Multiple Outputs. If you enable it, then each articulation on the list will get 2 more rows. That means you can assign 3 MIDI messages per articulation that are sent simultaneously to the third-party sound module or plugin on that track. The next new feature is in the score editor and it is called Automatic Slurs. A slur in Western music notation is a curved line between 2 or more notes to instruct a legato playing style like single bow, single breath, or a single pick. There are a lot of new commands, menus and workflows regarding these automatic slurs that I will explain in the book. Here's just a quick overview. The Score project settings has new parameters for the automatic slurs in the Layout tab. If you open the Score editor and select the Parts box in the main inspector, you will see a new symbol in the Crescendo and Slurs group. it is the automatic slurs symbol. You can drag the symbol over the notes in the score editor to create the slurs. With the automatic slur, you just drag the symbol over a group of selected notes and the slur will automatically create it over those notes, and Logic knows to put the slur above or below the notes. If you drag the symbol over a single note, then it will create a slur between that and the adjacent note. Of course, you still can edit the length and the shape of the slur. There are additional commands for specific actions that are found in the following menus. Right-click on a note and the shortcut menu has a new Automatic Slurs submenu containing all the slurs commands. The Local Functions menus in the Score editor has in the Note Attribute submenu another new submenu, also Automatic Slurs. And finally, the big new feature in this Logic Update 10.4.2, the many new additions and improvements to the Smart Tempo feature. There is so much new functionality that I spent about 30 pages just for that topic in my book. I might do a separate YouTube video just for this feature because there's so much stuff to cover and to demonstrate. But for now, I want to show the following new feature and changes in Smart Tempo. Improved Smart Tempo Editor, new and improved Smart Tempo commands, new Smart Tempo options in the project settings, Smart Tempo for Multitrack, and Smart Tempo for MIDI with its own Smart Tempo Editor functionality. Let's start with a look at the improved Smart Tempo Editor. And yes, the editor has a new name. File Tempo Editor has been renamed to Smart Tempo Editor. In this example, I have a multitrack recording of 4 audio tracks of a drum groove. As you will hear, that groove speeds up and slows down, so no steady tempo at all. I want to demonstrate the interface changes in the Smart Tempo Editor using this multitrack recording to point out right away the special features that are now available for multitrack recordings. Double-click on the audio region to open the editor's pane and select the Smart Tempo Editor if it is not selected yet. The first change are the 2 local menus. The various commands from the previous Actions menu have now been placed in the new Edit menu and View menu. The name of the currently displayed file was previously shown in the upper left corner, but it is now part of a selector that opens a pop-up menu. This has to do with the new multitrack capabilities. Because if the current audio region belongs to a multitrack recording, then all the other audio regions in that group are listed in that pop-up menu, so you can quickly switch between them. You will also see an additional item, Downmix, which is a file that Logic automatically bounces from all the audio regions in this multitrack set. When you select that option, then Logic displays the waveform of this downmix, which is displayed in gray. The View menu has 2 new options. The Tempo Curve Overlay is a toggle that lets you display the region tempo in the area of the waveform overview. This is the tempo information, the beat markers, that is saved in the audio file as metadata. The other option, Downmix Waveform, displays the waveform of the bounced downmix file superimposed on the waveform of the currently selected audio region. For example, if I select the kick, its waveform is displayed in light color, and the downmix waveform is displayed in dark color. This menu option is only visible when you have Smart Tempo Multitrack set. The next change you will notice are the slightly different commands, which are now much better to understand. First of all, the word Adapt has been changed to Apply, and there are only 2 options which represent the 2 directions from where to where you apply the tempo. Apply region tempo to project tempo, or apply project tempo to region tempo. You notice that the Apply Region Tempo to Project Tempo has 3 dots, which means a dialog window will open first. Here are the 2 additional options that you can enable. Please check out my previous book, Logic Pro 10 What's New in 10.4, where I explain those options regarding the downbeat shifting and the maintaining position of other regions. By the way, the 3 locations where you can access those Smart Tempo commands are now much more consistent. You can access them from the local menu of the Smart Tempo editor, or by right-clicking on a region and select Tempo submenu from the shortcut menu. Or select the Tempo submenu in the main menu Edit. Next, the Smart Tempo page in the project settings has 2 new options. The first option is a checkbox labeled Create Matching Edit Group when creating Smart Tempo Multitrack sets. A Smart Tempo Multitrack set is a new thing in Logic when using Smart Tempo with multitrack recordings. For example, the 4 tracks in my example is a so-called Smart Tempo Multitrack set. If you look in the project audio browser, you will see these files and regions organized in an audio file group, an existing feature that got extended now with Smart Tempo. Back to the project settings window. This checkbox automatically creates a channel strip group with the editing and quantize log feature enabled. Logic will do this whenever you create new multitracks recordings, but also when you import a set of audio files that belong to a multitrack recording. Let me quickly demonstrate manually what this checkbox is doing automatically. I select all the tracks that belong to the multitrack set. I create a channel strip group by going to the Mix menu and select Create Group. You see the group inspector appears in the main inspector, if that was the first group. From the settings area of the group inspector, I enable editing and quantize log. Now you see the green Q button appear on the track header. This will create a so-called edit group. Remember the wording in the project settings about the edit group. Now, when I edit any region that is part of this group, then that edit is applied to all other regions of that group. The other new option in the project settings is a pop-up menu where you can select the Export Tempo resolution. This determines what data is written as tempo information, the metadata stored in the audio file. Choose Beats to export the beat markers exactly how you see them in the Smart Tempo editor. The other option, Smooth, is more suitable when you perform additional flex editing in your audio region. Now let's have a quick look at the amazing possibility with Smart Tempo and multitrack recordings. This topic alone is worth a 2-hour tutorial, but I just want to scratch the surface with a quick demonstration. I simulate a live multitrack recording by using a Pro Tools session where I played 4 tracks of a drum groove that are slowed down in tempo and then picked it up again, as you can see on the tempo track in Pro Tools. This is the groove I used earlier. I used the amazing little utility Soundflower to route these 4 tracks internally into Logic, where I can record those individual audio channels similar to an individual mic input. Now in Logic, I record enable all 4 tracks. Remember, you can slide across the buttons on the track header instead of individually clicking each of one of them. Let's check the signal by playing the Pro Tools session. Now in Logic, I enable Adapt Tempo mode in the control bar. Now I start to record in Logic and play the Pro Tools session. As you can see, Logic recorded the 4 individual tracks, analyzed them, and created the tempo events in the project tempo track. If you open the project audio browser, you will see the 4 recorded audio files grouped in a Smart Tempo multitrack set. If you open the Smart Tempo editor, you see the name of the region in the pop-up menu where you can switch to a specific region. If the downmix option doesn't appear in the pop-up menu, as it should, then right-click on one of the audio regions in the workspace and select from the Tempo submenu in the shortcut menu the command Edit Smart Tempo Multitrack Set. In a multitrack recording, Logic is using the sum of all multitrack signals to analyze the tempo. Here you can determine with the individual checkboxes which of the audio files Logic is using to detect the tempo that is performed in that recording. The 4th column, labeled Regions Need to be Bounced, is a special procedure that I explain in the book. Click the Update button, and now if you check the Name pop-up menu in the Smart Tempo editor, you should see the downmix option. When I play back the recording, it plays back exactly how I recorded it, and we see the tempo that Logic analyzed as tempo events in the tempo track. Now I can add additional recordings using the click or add Apple loops that follow exactly that tempo track. To demonstrate that, I open the loop browser and choose the 80s Pop Rock Guitar 3 and drag it over onto the workspace. If I play back the project, the Apple loop plays accordingly to all the tempo changes with the multitrack recordings. Now I do one more step. I enable flex on all the drum tracks that I recorded because I want to change the project tempo and want the multitrack recording follow that tempo. As you can see in the region inspector, the flex and follow parameter on all regions is set to on. I choose a new tempo set in the tempo header and set it to 110 BPM. What you will hear now is that the freely recorded multitrack recording that had tempo all over the place, recorded without a click, now plays at a steady tempo of 110 beats per minute, or whatever tempo I see in the project. By the way, if I select the previous tempo set, then I will have the original recorded tempo back, or I could use the Apply Region Tempo to Project Tempo, because the analyzed tempo is stored as metadata in each individual audio file of that multitrack recording. This simple example is just a glimpse of what is possible with Smart Tempo, and now also with multitrack recording and MIDI recording, as we will see next. If you haven't started to explore these possibilities, it is definitely worth it, even if you will experience some growing pains here and there. Make sure you read the 30 pages about Smart Tempo in my last book and the 28 pages of the Smart Tempo topic in the new book to understand the basics and all the details about Smart Tempo. The next new feature for Smart Tempo is MIDI. Yes, Smart Tempo now also works with MIDI recordings and MIDI regions. Here's a quick demonstration. I have a MIDI track with a piano plugin and now record a few bars without a click using Adapt Tempo mode. Logic automatically analyzes the tempo during the recording, and when I stop, it applies that tempo as tempo events to the tempo track. It even moves the first note to the downbeat. If you look at the piano roll editor, you can see that the MIDI events are placed nicely on the bars beats grid. Maybe you have to quantize some notes if necessary. Now you can add a drummer track, other loops, or record more tracks because now you have a defined tempo grid. Smart Tempo also works when you already have a MIDI recording that was recorded without a click. Here's another demonstration. Now I'm in Keep Tempo mode and record a few bars on a MIDI track without a click. Now I have the MIDI region, and when I look at it in the piano roll editor, I can see that it is not on a grid. Now we open the Smart Tempo editor the first time for a MIDI region. The interface is almost identical with the exception that it displays the MIDI events instead of an audio waveform. The beat markers that you see are based on the project tempo, which has no reference to the MIDI events because I recorded them without a project click. Now look what happens when I use Smart Tempo to analyze the MIDI region. I choose from the Edit menu, Remove Original Tempo and Analyze again. The beat markers are placed based on Logic's tempo detection of that MIDI performance. This is now the region tempo, the tempo information that is stored with the MIDI region. Let's just pause for a second and let me point out what just happened in the Smart Tempo editor. The most important thing is to understand that what you see in the Smart Tempo editor, the horizontal note bars representing the MIDI note events, is not the same what you see in the piano roll editor, although they look similar. In the piano roll editor, you see horizontal MIDI notes aligned against the region's bars beats grid that represent the project's bars beats grid. They share the same ruler. You can edit the MIDI events, move them along the grid, all the stuff you already know. The first difference in the Smart Tempo editor is that you cannot edit those MIDI events. They are only displayed, read only. The second difference is the ruler on top of the Smart Tempo editor. It represents the region's own bars beats grid. This is a big difference because usually a MIDI region automatically aligns to the project's bars beats grid. Logic's Smart Tempo for MIDI feature now gives a MIDI region not only its independent tempo grid, it can also change that tempo grid by moving the individual beat markers that form that tempo grid. When you analyze a MIDI region, Logic moves the grid by moving the beat markers to the correct musical position. And you can also manually move the beat markers if Logic's analysis wasn't correct. So think of these orange beat markers as a timing grid that is displayed as an overlay. Each beat marker contains a tempo value, like a tempo event on the project's tempo track, and each downbeat marker can contain a time signature value. That is what you see in the ruler on top of the smart tempo, the region tempo that is now stored with the MIDI region. Each dot on that blue tempo curve represents a beat marker if its tempo value is different from the tempo value of the previous beat marker on that grid. This is the same concept as a tempo event in the project tempo track, but now each MIDI region can contain its own independent tempo track describing the tempo grid of that performance, and now you can apply that region tempo track to the project tempo track without performing any tedious beat mapping manually. So when I used the Analyze command in the previous step, you saw that the MIDI events in the Smart Tempo editor remained unchanged. Only the beat markers moved to represent the beats in my piano performance, and therefore the individual tempo. Before, after. Before, after. All this is super important to understand about Smart Tempo, and I explain those concepts step by step in my book with easy to follow examples. Now let's continue. If you play that region in the Smart Tempo editor, you can hear the click based on the beat markers to check if the tempo detection was correct. If not, then you can adjust the beat markers with the handles the same way they work with audio regions. However, there is one step missing. Although the MIDI region has its own region tempo, it is still different from the project tempo. You have two options. Either you apply the project tempo to region tempo, or the other way around, apply the region tempo to the project tempo. Here's what happens when I do the second one. I select from the Edit menu, Apply Region Tempo to Project Tempo. Logic will align the region's bars beats grid to the project's bars beats grid and add the appropriate tempo events to maintain the original tempo of the MIDI region. As a result, the region plays in sync with the project tempo, and you can add more tracks to the recording or change the project tempo. The region will stay in sync. All that might sound a little bit confusing because I rushed through the features. However, it is not that complicated after all. There are only a few basic MIDI concepts and a few new Smart Tempo concepts that you have to understand. All of that I explain step by step in my book, so you have a proper foundation of all that. It is amazing how much you can do with audio and MIDI regions and their newly gained freedom from the constraints of tempo and click. Okay, that sums it up about my coverage of the Logic Pro 10 update 10.4.2. There's a lot to try out, to explore and to incorporate into your Logic Pro workflow. For more in-depth explanation and coverage of all the new features and changes that I didn't have time in this video, please check out my new book Logic Pro 10 What's New in 10.4.2 with information you won't find anywhere else. Don't forget to read my free Logic and Pro Tools tutorials and check out the books in my graphically enhanced manual series. By the way, on Apple's iBook Store, you can download free samples of all my books in the special interactive multi-touch iBooks version, the best way to learn a software application. All the links are available on my website dingdingmusic.com.